a research organisation which helps us compare whether or not we're doing better than the Australians? Is that essentially what it is?
But a few key differences, and I think this is where the study that the Helen Clark Foundation have done is quite eye-opening and pretty sobering reading. I think the really important aspect of that study was seeing the increase. It's about a third of respondents who said that they would not be opposed. They would be kind of open to the idea of a strongman leader in a less democratic sense.
Wow.
Now, I'm paraphrasing, but that's essentially the gist of what the sort of survey asked. And to see that number of people in New Zealand who are open to the idea of a less democratic approach with more of an authoritarian, focus, that should be a big wake-up call.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's just a wake-up call, to one political party. I think everybody needs to really pay attention now and say, hold on a second, why have we drifted? Clearly, a lot of people in this country are dissatisfied with the status quo. Why?
Now, some people would think, oh, gosh, if this foundation's got Helen Clark's name on it, then possibly it's got more to do with social engineering than social cohesion. And looking down the list of the questions that she asked, hey, maybe I'm cherry picking here, but it seems to be a bit of this, how poor are you? How safe are women feeling? Are you proud to be a New Zealander? All these types of things. They're kind of like trigger questions in some ways, aren't they?
Yeah, sure. And we've always got to be careful when a subjective set of questions are asked of people. It can sometimes depend on pretty arbitrary things that are going on in their lives. But across a large enough sample group, you start to get a sense of where things are heading, of course. Yeah. I think one of the key things here, and this is something that the person who's fronting this study and the findings, Shamabil Yaqub, he's a well-known economist, and I've probably just butchered his last name, but he's a well-known economist here in New Zealand, and he's doing this work on behalf of the Helen Clark Foundation. Yeah. And in an interview with Q&A that he did, I encourage people to watch it. He really sort of emphasizes the fact that there are clearly problems here in terms of people feeling like they're not being heard and people feeling like they can't have the tough conversations. Yeah. But to his credit, he really emphasized the fact that we need to get back to dialogue and having at times the necessary debates that probably aren't happening enough. And I would sort of tie this in really with some research that's also just come out of Vanderbilt University in the United States. The Future of Free Speech organization based at Vanderbilt University have just produced their global free speech survey. Yeah. And that's compared to 2021, so 4 years ago with their most recent results, shows that there is a significant decrease across a large number of countries that were surveyed, about 33 countries surveyed. Is a significant decrease, a trend, towards people perhaps giving up on free speech, or at least the application of free speech across, most aspects of their life. Yeah. And they might still say, in principle, we support free speech as sort of a grand idea. But when it comes down to the nitty gritty, to the detail, like when it comes to, say, their religion and whether they can tolerate people saying things about their religion, or other sort of perhaps controversial or sensitive topics, the support for free speech has declined. And this is a common thing now we're seeing across all sorts of different countries, not just those who have not had a democratic tradition, but particularly in those countries that have a long democratic tradition. So there is I think it's a really important thing to stress here, and that is that free speech and democratic adherence, or this belief that we can work our problems out through dialogue, through participation, through a community approach where there's back and forth going on, that is being lost. And we are not an exception to this rule.
I think, this week, of course, the Treaty Principles Bill comes back before the House, and perhaps this is an example of just exactly what we're talking about. If you want an example of social cohesion, well, in some ways, maybe David Seymour has done us a favour. People have run to their banners, as it were. People now have a view and an opinion on the treaty and what it means, whereas perhaps it was more of a meh beforehand. Having said that, though, the lack of social cohesion on this and other issues are particularly apparent at the moment.
Yeah, and I think this is important when we come back to our definition of what social cohesion means, or what it should mean in a democratic sense.
Yeah.
I mean, in a democracy, the idea of forcing everybody to sort of get on board with your idea is, of course, anathema. It goes against the spirit of democracy. The question is, though, can we continue all living very different lives, and can we adapt a single system to suit all of us? Well, no, there has to be compromise.
Yep.
But how do we reach some sort of reasonable compromise, some kind of solution, without free speech, without dialogue, without the necessary debate? And we would argue that free speech is a de-radicalizing influence. Mm-hmm. It stops polarization to the degree that we're seeing it grow now, particularly in Western liberal democracies. So that's really important. And I think too, it's understanding that a tough debate is not actually a sign of a lack of social cohesion.
Yeah.
It's the fact that we can still talk to each other. That is a huge win. Mm. And as long as we don't forget that, as long as we keep coming back to the idea that, okay, hey, there might have been, a lot of acrimony, a lot of bitterness in this most recent, set of protests around the Treaty Principles Bill.
Yeah.
But if people get talking, then we can make some progress in understanding better the other perspective and recognizing that there may not just be two perspectives.
Yeah.
There may be many different shades of opinion on this. And
Certainly.
so then what do we do with that?
Yeah, certainly in terms of the Responses Select Committee, people have had an opportunity to, for the most part, have their voice heard on this particular topic. But interesting to get this perspective in terms of social cohesion. Another perhaps blunt instrument way of measuring this is if we just look at immigration. How many Kiwis going to Australia to get better jobs and more money, and how many Aussies are coming here? We can see which one's the happier population, perhaps. But yeah, this is why I'm not in the research business. Also, Nick, hey, appreciate your view as always. Thanks very much for being on the program today.
Andrew, cheers.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.